Mr. Harper, I saw somebody walking down the street with a shirt a couple of days ago that said Harper was right. And I said, about what? He goes, all the stuff that matters.
Very kind, very kind.
But you look at that.
I'm sure it was a relative.
But watching that video, I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only person in this room frustrated that you were right. Frustrated that when you speak of friendship not being qualified and friendship having to remain steadfast, and it's not doing the easy thing, but doing the hard thing, and feeling like the exact opposite is happening in this country that we all hold so dear. You're the one who said those words. You are the one who led Canada with your words and with your actions. So, and we'll get more deeply into it, but just given the fact that we heard it from your voice, from your mouth, when I say that, what do you think?
Yeah, look, just some thoughts. Thanks, Ben, for that intro, those kind words. Just three thoughts I want to begin with. Number one, first of all, I just want to say, as a supporter of B'nai Brith, not just congratulations on the 150th anniversary, but what a terrific job this organization has done in the past 2 years in pushing back against the poison that is out there. It has been... The actions of this organization have been just, consistent and determined and unapologetic, and that is what we need. Secondly, I just want to, beyond B'nai Brith, I said the same thing the other night in Vancouver to a big, largely Jewish audience there. Look, I understand. Look, I really grieve for the Jewish community right now. I understand. I'm close enough to understand how tough it has been and how tough it really is out there. And look, as I say, my heart breaks, and I know you're all struggling with it. I still believe, when I was PM and taking those stands, and if you'd read the media, you wouldn't have thought there was a single Canadian on my side. But I felt, and we saw over and over again, that those positions were actually supported by Canadians. We can go into why they were supported by Canadians, but they were. And I believe they still are. Look, the bad people are very loud. But I think there's a lot of very quiet people out there who understand that, not just that Israel is a free and democratic ally, but more importantly, that the Jewish community of this country, the Jewish people of this country, just makes such a disproportionate contribution to our enterprise, our business life, to our charitable life, to giving, philanthropic giving, and to public service. And so just know that you have friends and you are appreciated widely across this country. And I know you've heard this before, but I'm going to say it again. Ben's father and I were on probably unfortunately more often than not on different sides of things. But we did have, I think, a common view of Canada's place in the world, the fight for freedom and democracy. And I just want to once again remind you of what the late Prime Minister Mulroney did after October the 7th, when he was very unwell. Got out of his house in Montreal, got on a plane to New York, and delivered a major international speech, not just against the events of October 7th, against anti-Semitism, and in support of the state of Israel. And I think, I think it was a really proud moment for all of us as Canadians, and I'm delighted to see that Ben has now got an official position with this organization, carrying that forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So before we look at the state of play here in Canada, as well as on the other side of the world, I think, unfortunately, I want to start with a look down to our southern neighbors. It's the very sad news of the assassination of 31-year-old activist Charlie Kirk, father of two, who was on a college campus when an assassin's bullet felled him at the beginning of what a lot of people believed was going to be a very influential life. He was a staunch advocate for the Jewish people as well as the Jewish state, and a big believer in open and free dialogue, the violent collision of ideas. And he said this 2 years ago. He said, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence, because you start to think the other side is so evil, they lose their humanity. I think what makes this country on the verge of going to a place we don't want it to go right now is that we're afraid to go to places like this and have conversations. I'm not. And he passed at the age of 31. Mr. Harper, is this the state of public discourse in North America? Is this where we are?
Well, in fairness, I don't think it's where we are in Canada, although it's getting tougher. But look, I am, even before this incident, just increasingly concerned about the state of public life in the United States, the level of polarization and hostility is really reaching frightening levels, and this is an indication of that. Charlie Kirk, didn't know him personally, probably took a few positions, lots of positions I agreed with, a few I didn't. But, as you said, Ben, his tool was to, persuasive free speech. And, when that starts to become the basis on which people can be killed, that is a very frightening development. I just hope that on both sides of the polarization in the United States, people will start to look at where this is headed and pull back. You can have vigorous arguments without ostracization, cancellation, and ultimately assassination. This is still the most important country in the world, certainly the most important country in terms of the free and democratic world. And we just have to raise our voices and say stop, because this is getting really scary.
When we look at the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, I'm trying to figure out what how to describe it. Are we on a track that we can't get off of, and we're aiming towards a point of no return, or is it something that ebbs and flows as it has historically?
Well, look, that's a good question. Does it ebb and flow? Look, there are days, I think some of you have heard me speak before, kind of how I came to my views. My father grew up in Moncton, New Brunswick, in a city at the time very divided, English versus French, Catholic versus Protestant. And, he grew up kind of opposition to all of that, and with a very strong, and he grew up during the Second World War with Adolf Hitler, a very strong opposition to anti-Semitism, and really an understanding of where anti-Semitism could lead a society if it's not in check. And look, I just think he's rolling in his grave, probably just in disbelief that, we're back to where I think most of us thought we would never be, certainly when I was a boy. Look, I don't know whether it ebbs and flows or it's constant. I just think we have to tackle what's driving it. And I'm going to be very blunt about this. Some of you have heard me say this before. What is driving it is that we have allowed certain institutions in our society to make anti-Semitism, framed a certain way, socially and politically acceptable. After the Second World War, we, as a society, came to the conclusion that what we called far-right political opinion, I mean, you could have it, but it was really socially and politically beyond the pale. And what's the essence of far-right political opinion? The essence is that you divide people not based on their individual dignity and human worth. You divide them into categories. Some groups are superior, other groups are inferior. And if you're an inferior group, you can be discriminated against, you can be marginalized, and ultimately you can be killed. And we just said that was beyond the pale. But what we have permitted in our universities, and to some degree our media, but certainly our academic institutions, we have permitted the germination of a far left ideology. And far left ideology is just the mirror image of this. What it does is it takes people based on generalizations about their categories, gender, race, religion, whatever, and it says there are oppressors and there are oppressed. And if you're in an oppressor category, you can be discriminated against, marginalized, and you can even be killed. And this is rampant, and this is acceptable on institutions, institutions that we fund publicly. I mean, this is overwhelmingly public money. given to these institutions on the basis that they represent fundamental free and democratic values of individual worth and human dignity and what we used to call small L liberalism. And this just should not be acceptable. And people who propagate this kind of philosophy, I mean, I say the Jews get it both ways, because Jews were an inferior group in the far right, and in the far left, they're an oppressor group. And, but either way, it's not just about the Jews. This entire intellectual framework should be unacceptable in an institution of higher learning. The people who advocated it should not only be defunded, they should be relieved of their posts. And we've got to tackle this. And it goes back to, Ben, your first question about Charlie Kirk, because what anti-Semitism is, and my father taught me this, one of the reasons to so fear anti-Semitism as a Gentile is that whether it is on the left or the right, anti-Semitism is the first sign of a political movement and a society going to a dangerous extreme. And we are seeing more and more manifestations of this, and they will be beyond anti-Semitism, and we've got to snuff this out.
I said a number of times that when it comes to those groups that stand against Israel and stand against the Jewish people of Canada, that everything will never be enough. Meaning we currently have what I humbly believe is the most pro-Palestinian federal government in history. And they stand on the precipice of recognizing a Palestinian state, even with hostages still in captivity. Just a few hours ago, our Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, said that Ottawa was reevaluating its relationship with Israel on the grounds of they didn't like the attack in Qatar. And despite that, despite giving so much to that side, we see protests popping up in front of the homes of cabinet ministers. And I wondered how you can square that circle.
I don't want to get too partisan with the current government, but look, Geopolitics 101. People used to ask me repeatedly, why do you so strongly, why does your government so strongly support Israel? They say, is your region religious or moral, or what is it? And I used to say, look, it's real simple. It's the interests of Canada. We are a free and democratic society in a dangerous world. Israel is a free and democratic ally. The friends of Israel are friends of Canada. The enemies of Israel are enemies of Canada, and they would destroy Canada. And boy, if you don't get that as a leader of a country, I don't know what you understand about, international affairs. And so we just have to keep driving this home. It's to me distressing that in so many capitals, you actually would have to explain this to the people running the government.
Well, that's what I want to ask next, because you've got some very smart people who've risen to the top of the leadership of their nations, and we don't have to name names. But so many of them were very quick to express dismay over this quote-unquote escalation. Now, not for nothing, that same expression, that same language was used by most of those other people to describe Israel's offensive against the Houthis, or the Beeper attack in Lebanon against Hezbollah, or against the nuclear facilities in Iran. In each case, that was an escalation, as they saw it, that didn't escalate. And here we are again using the same language. What is it about what I think we would all generally accept? These are all very smart, educated people who know how to play the political game to rise to the top of their chosen field, and yet they seem to be getting this thing so wrong.
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. First of all, just on the escalation, let's be really clear. Leave Hamas aside, that's not resolved, but what the Israelis did to take out Hezbollah in Lebanon has made Lebanon a better place. What then happened in Syria with the fall of Assad, jury's out, but it looks like it's a better place. And of course, what has happened with Iran, both Israeli action and American action, has made the world a much safer place. Like, talk about, this is not escalation, this is de-escalation. And sometimes you have to de-escalate through force, which, the Israelis understand. why is it that so many don't understand this? Look, I'm not going to comment on individual cases. I'll just tell you what I faced, what I saw in when I was in government, and just be clear. And some of you have heard me say this before. When I was prime minister, I fought an ongoing battle that never ended every day in office against our foreign affairs department trying to oppose Israel. It was just so ingrained, and I've seen it in many other, almost all other Western foreign affairs departments. And unfortunately, in a lot of free and democratic societies, what happens is that the view of diplomats, not all of them, but of the diplomatic community, becomes that the role of diplomats is not to represent your country to the world, but to represent the global community in your country. And the global community includes 50 Muslim states, some 20 plus Arab states, and one Jewish state. And so it's just real easy, as I said in the video, it's just real easy to, take any position against Israel, and to single Israel out for criticism, and to get along, go along to get along with international consensus. And I'm very proud of the fact that myself, well, by the way, with the virtually unanimous, I think it was the unanimous support of my cabinet caucus, that we never did that. We fought against that. And quite frankly, I used to find, Ben, that when the kind of cameras were off and I was, in these meetings with other leaders, and this would come up and I would forcefully express my view, how many would actually agree with me in private? But they didn't want to fight the media establishment. They didn't want to fight the academic establishment, and they just kind of went along. And that's not leadership. And there are lots of ways as politicians where we have to make our compromises. But when it comes to really fundamental values about friendship and alliances and enemies in the world, you just cannot compromise those things. So leaders, Canadian leaders, Western leaders who are not standing by Israel are jeopardizing the long-term interests of their own countries. And that is what we should so strongly oppose. And let me just say one other thing on this. I'm sorry if please said so many of these things before, but just one other thing about this. You talk about the Qatari attack. Do you agree or do you disagree? What about how the war is being prosecuted? What about, the judicial reforms in Israel? And I was often accused, people would say, well, Harper says that any statement against the Israeli government or Israeli government policy is anti-Semitism. I never said any such thing. You can oppose the government or the individual policies of the government of the State of Israel. In fact, they actually do so in Israel. It's called the democracy, right? Lots of people are opposed to the current government. Lots of people are opposed to the current war effort. You're going to ask me about that later. No, that's not anti-Semitic. But most of these criticisms come from people who are opposed to the existence of the State of Israel. And to oppose the existence of a state because it is the only Jewish state in the world is the essence of anti-Semitism. You cannot be opposed to the existence of Israel and claim not to be anti-Semitic.
You had just, I believe, just come back from Israel, and you told me that you believe that the vast majority of Israelis supported the Netanyahu government's tactics in prosecuting the war, and that was then. Would you agree with that statement today?
Yeah, no, that's not the case. And I'm not saying that a majority oppose it. I think what's happened is public opinion in Israel has become very divided. In fairness to the Netanyahu government, it hasn't become divided on an alternative strategy. It's just become divided whether they're for or against this strategy. Because I think the truth is that the alternative strategy, it's not really clear in most cases what those who are opposed to what the Netanyahu government is doing, it's not really clear what it is they're advocating exactly. I mean, they say bring back the hostages, but, bluntly, if Israel's not prosecuting a war, what incentive does Hamas have to return the hostages? So look, it's as I say, it's been a long period. We have to put this in perspective. I mean, Gaza. I don't know this land area of the city of Winnipeg, but I suspect it's probably about the size of Gaza. And this is 2 years. So, you can see frustration in public opinion. But look, I will support Israel in doing what it needs to be done. If it was, if Hamas attacked my country, I would want our government to prosecute it to the fullest. And I think what Israel has done in the region, taking out, the immediate cause of the war is Hamas, but we all know the hand behind all this was Iran. And to the extent the Israeli government has not just been prosecuting the war against Hamas, but destroying the Iranian terrorist empire that they were building, I think that's been a great benefit to the region.
We're going to leave it on that optimistic note. Yeah. And I want to thank you yet again, Mr. Harper, for an incredible conversation. Let's do this again in 18 months. Yeah.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Round of applause for Mr. Stephen Harper. Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Ben Mulroney Show.